Have you ever wondered why, despite all your prayers, all your devotion, all your spiritual seeking, you still feel like something is missing? Why does God sometimes feel so close you can almost touch the divine presence, and other times feel impossibly distant as if you're shouting into an empty void? What if I told you that everything you've been taught about your relationship with God might be built on the most subtle, yet most devastating illusion humanity has ever believed? For thousands of years, we've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding that has shaped not just our prayers, but our entire spiritual identity. We wake up each morning and ask God to be with us. We face challenges and beg God to come closer. We celebrate victories and thank God for staying near. But here's the question that might change everything. What if God was never separate from you in the first place? What if the very act of asking God to come closer is the thing that keeps you from experiencing the fullness of divine presence? Think about it for a moment. Every time you say, "God, please be with me," you're unconsciously affirming a distance that doesn't actually exist in spiritual reality. You're placing yourself on one side and God on the other, creating a gap that you then spend your entire life trying to bridge. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with all your heart, you do everything right, you follow all the spiritual practices, yet you still feel like you're reaching for something just beyond your grasp? But before we begin diving deeper into this profound truth, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, here's where everything shifts. What you're about to discover might surprise you, and it might even feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges the very foundation of how you've been taught to relate to the divine. The truth is that God is not merely accompanying your journey through life. God is not a companion walking beside you, ready to help when you call out. Stay with me until the end because this understanding will transform not just your prayer life, but your entire experience of existence. The presence you've been seeking outside yourself, the divine force you've been trying to attract, the sacred power you've been hoping will finally notice you and respond to your desperate pleas. That presence is not separate from you. It's not waiting somewhere in the heavens for you to get it right. It's not judging your worthiness or measuring your spiritual progress. What if I told you that the very consciousness by which you're aware of these words right now, the intelligence that's processing this information, the life force that's beating your heart as you watch, that is the presence you've been calling God? This isn't poetry. This isn't metaphor. This is the literal truth that mystics throughout history have tried to reveal, but which religious systems have obscured beneath layers of doctrine, ritual, and the persistent belief in separation. And once you truly understand this, once you recognize what's really happening beneath the surface of your spiritual seeking, now, I want to go even deeper into this truth, because what I'm about to share with you has been perhaps the most misunderstood teaching in all of spiritual history. When Jesus stood before the people and declared that the kingdom of God is within you, he wasn't being poetic. He wasn't using beautiful language to inspire hope about some distant paradise. He was revealing something so radical, so transformative, that it has the power to completely reshape your entire understanding of existence. The kingdom he spoke of isn't a destination you reach after you die. It isn't a reward for good behavior or spiritual achievement. It's not something you earn through years of meditation or countless hours of prayer. The kingdom is here, right now, not as some abstract concept floating in the spiritual atmosphere, but as the very essence of who you are in this exact moment. The fullness of God, the wholeness of divine presence, the infinite intelligence that created galaxies and orchestrates the dance of atoms, all of this is expressing itself as the consciousness you call I. This is the hidden truth that changes everything. Most people spend their entire lives on a journey to find something they've never actually lost. They search for God in temples, in scriptures, in rituals, believing that somewhere out there, if they just do enough, believe enough, sacrifice enough, they'll finally touch the divine. But the Master was telling us something completely different. Yet here's where the tragic reversal happened. Somewhere along the way, religious institutions took this immediate, present moment reality, and pushed it into the future. They made the kingdom a distant heaven, accessible only after death, granted only to those who followed the right rules. They transformed Jesus' revelation of present oneness into a system of future rewards and punishments. Think about the impact of this reversal on your own life. How many times have you prayed as if God were somewhere else, listening from a distance? How many decisions have you made based on the belief that you're separate from the source of wisdom and guidance? How many moments of anxiety have you endured because you felt cut off from divine support? But when Jesus said, "The Father and I are one," he wasn't claiming a special relationship that only he could have. He was revealing the universal truth of every human being. The divine nature isn't something that belongs exclusively to prophets and saints. It's the root of every life, including yours. The only difference between you and someone who lives in constant peace, who moves through challenges with unshakable confidence, who seems to have access to infinite creativity and wisdom, the only difference is awareness. They've removed the veil of separation in their own consciousness. They've stopped believing in the illusion of distance between themselves and the source of all life. They've awakened to what was always true. If this resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. What we're building here is a community of people who are committed to waking up to their true nature, and I'd love for you to be part of that journey with us. This isn't about becoming something you're not. This is about recognizing what you've always been. And once this recognition begins to dawn in your awareness, even just a little bit, everything starts to shift. Your prayers change. Your relationships transform. Your approach to challenges becomes completely different because you're no longer operating from the mindset of a separated being trying to reach God. You're beginning to live from the consciousness that God is the very life expressing through you right now. If this is resonating with you, write in the comments, "I'm ready to see this truth." Let me show you what happens when this shift truly begins to take root in your consciousness. Every person on a genuine spiritual path eventually reaches a critical crossroads, a moment when the old way of thinking simply doesn't work anymore. You've prayed enough, studied enough, meditated enough to know that something fundamental needs to change. This is the threshold between duality and oneness, and crossing it isn't about accepting a new belief system or memorizing spiritual concepts. It's a profound transformation in how you perceive reality itself. For your entire life, you've operated from what we might call duality consciousness. This is the mindset that sees two separate things, you over here and God over there. You as the imperfect human and God as the perfect divine. You as the seeker and God as the sought. This perception feels so natural, so obvious, that questioning it seems almost absurd. Yet this is precisely the illusion that generates every ounce of suffering you've ever experienced. Think about your deepest fears, your most persistent anxieties, your moments of crushing doubt. Trace them back to their source, and you'll find the same root belief. I am separate. I am alone. I am cut off from the source of life, love, and, wisdom. But here's the revelation that changes the entire game. When you begin to truly see, not just intellectually understand, but actually perceive, that there is no God and you, but only God appearing as you, something extraordinary happens. The foundation of fear begins to crumble, because fear can only exist where separation is believed. Fear requires a vulnerable me facing a hostile or indifferent universe. It needs the story of a fragile individual who might fail, might be abandoned, might not be enough. But what happens when that separate self is recognized as an illusion? What happens when you realize that the life you're living isn't your personal, isolated existence struggling to survive, but is actually a divine expression unfolding through individual form? Suddenly the ground shifts beneath your feet. You're not a mortal being desperately borrowing breath from infinity, hoping you can hold on long enough to figure things out. You're not a personality constructed from past experiences and future fears, frantically seeking validation from a distant God. The very breath moving through your lungs right now is the movement of God. The intelligence reading these words, processing this information, making connections and insights. This is the divine mind expressing as your individual consciousness. This isn't metaphor. This is the actual mechanics of existence. When this recognition dawns, even partially, even just for moments at a time, you experience something that religious teachings have pointed to for millennia but few have actually tasted. The structure of fear collapses because there's no separate self left to be afraid. Anxiety loses its grip because the one who was anxious is seen as a phantom, a mistaken identity. The constant need for external validation dissolves because you're no longer a separate entity seeking approval from something outside yourself. Instead, you begin to move through life from a completely different foundation. Your decisions come from a deeper place. Your responses to challenges carry a different quality. The impact you have on others shifts because you're no longer interacting from a defended, contracted position of separation. This is what the mystics throughout history have been trying to tell us, often in veiled language because the truth is so contrary to our conditioned thinking. Behind the scenes of every spiritual tradition, beneath the rituals and doctrines, this same revelation has been waiting. You are not separate from the source. You never have been. The journey isn't about becoming something new. It's about removing the false identity that has obscured what's always been true. If you're beginning to sense this shift happening in your own awareness, type in the comments. The separation is dissolving. Now here's where we need to examine something that might feel uncomfortable at first, because it involves challenging a phrase that has brought comfort to millions of people throughout history. You've probably said it yourself countless times. God is with me. You've whispered it in moments of fear, declared it in times of celebration, clung to it when everything seemed to be falling apart. And there's nothing wrong with seeking comfort in those words. But I want to reveal something that goes much deeper, something that will actually give you far more than comfort. It will give you unshakable peace. The phrase, God is with me, despite its good intentions, still carries within it the seed of the very separation we've been talking about. Listen carefully to the structure of that statement. When you say God is with me, you're inherently affirming two separate entities. There's God over there, and there's me over here. And sometimes God comes close, and sometimes God moves away. This creates a relationship based on proximity, on distance, on God's willingness to show up in your life. And what does that lead to? It creates an exhausting cycle where you're constantly trying to maintain God's presence, constantly worried about losing divine favor, constantly questioning whether you're worthy enough for God to stay near. Think about the impact this has on your daily experience. When things are going well, you feel blessed, convinced that God is close. But when challenges arise, when prayers seem unanswered, when life doesn't unfold the way you hoped, doubt creeps in. You start wondering if God has stepped back, if you've done something wrong, if you need to pray harder or be better to attract divine attention again. This isn't peace. This is spiritual anxiety disguised as faith. It's a belief system that keeps you trapped in the role of the supplicant, forever begging, forever hoping, forever trying to convince a distant God to come closer and help you. But there's a completely different approach to prayer, one that represents true spiritual maturity. Instead of supplication, the act of begging for what you don't have, there's recognition, the quiet realization that everything you've been asking for has already been given. This isn't positive thinking or wishful imagination. This is understanding the actual mechanics of divine reality. When you pray from supplication, you're operating from the mindset of lack. You're affirming that something is missing, something is broken, something needs to be added to your life from the outside. You're positioning yourself as incomplete, waiting for God to make you whole. Recognition works from an entirely different foundation. It doesn't beg because it knows there's nothing missing. It doesn't reach outward because it understands that fullness is already present within. It doesn't try to change God's mind or convince God to act because it sees that the divine nature is already expressing itself perfectly as your life right now. This is the hidden truth that transforms prayer from an act of desperation into an act of awareness. You're not asking God to give you peace. You're recognizing that peace is the nature of the divine presence that is your true identity. You're not begging for guidance. You're acknowledging that divine intelligence is the very mind by which you think. The journey from supplication to recognition is one of the most profound transformations you can experience. It changes not just how you pray, but how you live. Your entire relationship with existence shifts from one of lack and longing to one of fullness and gratitude. The decisions you make come from a place of inner knowing rather than outer desperation. And here's what's truly remarkable. When you stop begging for what you think you need and start recognizing what's already present, life begins to unfold with a grace and ease that supplication could never produce. If you're feeling the shift in your own spiritual practice, write in the comments, "I'm learning to recognize, not beg." Let me paint a picture of what actually happens in your day-to-day life when this shift from separation to oneness begins to take hold. Because this isn't just abstract spiritual philosophy. This is about real, tangible transformation that touches every corner of your existence. And what I'm about to describe might sound almost too good to be true, but I promise you, this is the natural result when consciousness awakens to its true nature. First, you'll notice that fear begins to lose its grip on you. Not all at once, not through willpower or positive affirmations, but organically, like ice melting in warm sunlight. Fear has always required a story, the story of a vulnerable, separate me facing an uncertain world alone. But when you start to recognize that you're not a fragile individual struggling through life, but rather the expression of infinite presence itself, that story loses its power. The foundation fear was built on simply isn't there anymore. You still have natural caution, healthy discernment, but that gnawing anxiety that used to color so many of your decisions, it begins to dissolve. Then something shifts in how you make choices. Instead of the exhausting mental gymnastics of weighing pros and cons, analyzing every possible outcome, trying to predict the future, you discover a different kind of intelligence emerging. Your decisions start flowing from a place of calm inner knowing. It's not that you become impulsive or careless, quite the opposite. You find yourself acting with greater wisdom, but it comes through you rather than from the grinding effort of your analytical mind. This clarity isn't something you force. It arises naturally when you're no longer operating from the panic of separation. If something in this video shifted your perspective or brought clarity to your path, go ahead and hit that like button. It's a simple way to let me know this content is serving you, and it helps others who are searching for these truths find their way here. And here's where it gets really interesting. Peace stops being something you have to create or maintain through perfect circumstances. It becomes your baseline, your natural state, regardless of what's happening externally. The chaos around you might continue, challenges might still arise, but there's a stillness at your core that circumstances can't touch. This is the peace that mystics have spoken of for centuries, and it's not a mood or an emotion. It's the recognition of your true nature. Your relationships begin to transform in ways you never expected. When you stop seeing yourself as a separate, defended personality, you naturally stop projecting that same separation onto others. You start to glimpse the divine presence behind the human masks everyone wears. This doesn't make you naive or permissive, but it fundamentally changes the quality of your interactions. Judgment softens. Compassion flows more naturally. The impact you have on people shifts because you're no longer meeting them from a place of lack and need. Even your experience of supply changes. When you recognize yourself not as a limited individual trying to acquire resources in a world of scarcity, but as the expression of infinite source itself, abundance begins to manifest in unexpected ways. Opportunities appear. Solutions emerge. Resources flow. Not through magical thinking, but through the simple principle that consciousness creates experience. Now, you might be wondering how to actually cultivate this awareness. How to move from understanding these concepts intellectually to living them experientially. And this brings us to something most people completely misunderstand about spiritual practice. The highest form of meditation isn't about doing more, trying harder, or achieving some special state. It's actually about undoing, the quiet release of mental effort, the surrender of the belief that you need to make something happen. True meditation isn't found in techniques or mantras or visualizations. Though these can be helpful starting points, it's discovered in the absence of all striving, all reaching, all attempt to get somewhere. When you sit quietly, not to achieve enlightenment, not to fix yourself, not to manifest desires, but simply to be, something remarkable happens. You become aware of a subtle, living presence at the core of your being. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy. It's known through a deep, wordless awareness that can't be captured in thoughts or concepts. If you're beginning to experience these shifts in your own life, drop in the comments. I feel this changing in me. What I'm about to share with you is the most practical application of everything we've been discussing. And it requires nothing from you except a willingness to pause. Because here's the beautiful truth that most spiritual seekers miss. You don't need to carve out an hour of meditation time in some perfectly quiet, sacred space to experience this oneness. You don't need to wait until conditions are ideal, or until you've mastered some complex technique. The doorway to divine awareness is available to you right now, in the midst of your ordinary, messy, complicated life. The practice is almost absurdly simple, which is probably why so many people overlook it in favor of more elaborate spiritual methods. Throughout your day, between tasks and moments of uncertainty, before making a decision or speaking words that matter, you simply stop for 3 to 5 seconds. That's it. Just a brief pause. And in that pause, instead of filling it with more thoughts or plans or worries, you rest in a simple recognition. The presence expressing as this moment is divine. You don't have to feel anything special. You don't have to achieve some altered state. You're simply acknowledging what's already true. What happens when you start doing this is remarkable. These tiny moments of recognition begin to weave silence into the fabric of your day. They become like anchor points, touching down into a deeper reality beneath the surface chaos of life. And gradually, almost without you noticing when it happened, this silence becomes your atmosphere. It becomes the ground upon which all your thoughts and actions unfold. Your external life might look exactly the same to an observer, but internally, everything has shifted. You're moving through the world from a completely different foundation, and this is where the transformation becomes visible in how you actually live. When you're no longer operating from the belief that you're a separate person who must make things happen through sheer force of will, your entire approach to life changes. Your actions lose their strain. Think about how much effort you've been putting into everything, trying to force outcomes, pushing against resistance, grinding through tasks with clenched determination. All of that strain comes from the mindset that you're alone in this, that success depends entirely on your personal effort. But when you recognize that you're the expression of divine presence, that the same intelligence, organizing galaxies, is moving through you, effort transforms into flow. Your decisions lose their confusion because you're no longer trying to figure everything out from the limited perspective of your human mind. You're allowing wisdom to emerge from a deeper source. And here's what's so interesting about this. From the outside, you might appear to be making quick, decisive choices. But inside, there's no agonizing, no second-guessing, no paralysis. There's just clarity arising naturally when it's needed. The best metaphor for this comes from nature itself. Think about a branch on a tree. Does it struggle to produce fruit? Does it wake up every morning anxious about whether it's doing enough, working hard enough, trying hard enough? Of course not. The branch simply abides in the vine, and the life flowing through the vine naturally expresses as fruit. There's no strain, no anxiety, no desperate effort. The branch doesn't make the fruit happen. It allows the life within to express through it. This is exactly how you're meant to live. Not forcing, not controlling, not trying to manufacture spiritual results, but simply abiding in the recognition of what you are and allowing that divine life to express naturally through your thoughts, words, and actions. The impact of this shift on your daily experience is profound. Tasks that used to drain you become effortless. Challenges that used to trigger panic become opportunities for deeper trust. The journey that once felt like an uphill battle transforms into something more like sailing. You're still participating, still engaged, but you're working with forces much greater than yourself, rather than trying to create everything through personal will alone. If this way of living is calling to you, share in the comments. I'm ready to flow, not force. Let me show you how this awareness begins to reshape the most practical, mundane aspects of your daily life, because this is where the rubber meets the road. You can have the most profound spiritual insights, but if they don't change how you show up at work, how you navigate your relationships, how you handle challenges and victories, then they remain abstract concepts rather than lived reality. Think about your work for a moment. In the past, you've probably approached problems and decisions with a mindset of, "What should I do?" followed by endless mental analysis, weighing options, consulting experts, trying to figure out the right answer through sheer cognitive effort. But when you're living from this deeper awareness, something shifts. Instead of that frantic mental churning, you find yourself listening inwardly, not to voices or supernatural guidance, but to a quiet knowing that emerges when you stop trying so hard. Solutions appear. The next step becomes obvious. You make decisions with a confidence that doesn't come from having all the answers, but from trusting the intelligence expressing through you. Your relationships undergo an even more profound transformation. For most of your life, you've been projecting your own fears, insecurities, and unmet needs onto the people around you. You see others through the lens of what they can give you, how they might hurt you, whether they're meeting your expectations. But when you recognize that the same divine presence at the core of your being is also at the core of theirs, everything softens. You start beholding the truth behind the masks people wear. This doesn't make you naive. You still have discernment, but you stop taking things so personally. You realize that when someone lashes out, they're operating from their own pain and confusion, not from the truth of who they are. The impact this has on how you interact with difficult people, challenging family dynamics, workplace conflicts, is nothing short of revolutionary. When challenges arise, and they will continue to arise because that's the nature of human experience, you have a completely different response. Instead of spiraling into fear or despair, instead of questioning why this is happening to you, you rest in the awareness that circumstances, no matter how intense, cannot alter your spiritual identity. The situation is what it is, and you deal with it practically. But it doesn't shake your foundation because your foundation isn't built on external conditions. It's built on the unchanging truth of what you are. Success becomes easier to navigate too. When good things happen, when achievements come, when life flows smoothly, you receive it all with genuine gratitude but without grasping. You don't cling to success as proof of your worth. You don't live in fear of losing it. You understand that success is simply one temporary form through which the divine presence is expressing, and you hold it lightly. And here's something that might surprise you. Failure loses its sting. When things don't work out, when you make mistakes, when you fall short of your own expectations, you recognize that failure belongs only to the human sense of self, not to your divine identity. This doesn't mean you become careless or irresponsible. It means you learn from mistakes without being crushed by them. You course correct without self-condemnation. What I'm describing isn't complicated spiritual gymnastics requiring years of training. This is actually the simplest way to live. All the complexity, all the strain, all the exhausting effort comes from trying to be something you're not. When you stop trying to manufacture holiness, when you cease striving to appear wise or good or spiritual, and instead recognize that everything God is already seeks expression through you, life becomes remarkably uncomplicated. Compassion flows naturally when you stop defending a false sense of self. Patience appears when you rest in inner peace rather than demanding that circumstances match your preferences. Love expresses itself spontaneously when you recognize your fundamental unity with all life. Jesus said, something profound that most people misunderstand: let your light shine. Notice he didn't say create your light, develop your light, or earn your light. He said let it shine. The light is already there. It's always been there. Your only task is to stop blocking it with the false identity of separation. If you're experiencing this simplicity beginning to emerge in your life, write in the comments, "It's simpler than I thought." What I want you to understand is that this isn't a one-time realization that suddenly fixes everything forever. The spiritual path isn't about reaching some permanent state where you never forget, never doubt, never slip back into old patterns. That's a fantasy that keeps people frustrated and discouraged. The real journey is far more graceful, far more forgiving than that. It's about developing a simple practice that becomes as natural as breathing, the practice of returning to recognition. Here's how it works in real life. You're moving through your day and suddenly fear grips you, or anxiety starts spiraling, or you feel that familiar sense of separation creeping back in, making you feel isolated and alone. This is completely normal. It's going to happen. But now you have a tool that changes everything. Instead of fighting the feeling, instead of condemning yourself for having it, instead of trying to force yourself into a better state, you simply return to recognition, not through affirmations repeated like mantras, not through mental gymnastics or willpower, just through quiet awareness. You pause and you remember, the life I'm living right now, in this very moment, is divine in its origin, its nature, and its expression. That's it. No drama, no spiritual performance, just a gentle return to what's true. And here's the beautiful thing. Each time you do this, something shifts. The veil of separation gets a little thinner. The light of awareness gets a little stronger. You're training your consciousness to default to truth, rather than to fear. You're creating new neural pathways, new patterns of perception, new ways of being in the world that align with reality, rather than with the illusion you've been taught. Before each significant activity during your day, you can practice this same simple pause. Before that important conversation, before making a decision, before responding to a challenge, before celebrating a victory, just for a moment, acknowledge, God is the presence of this moment. Not God will show up if I pray hard enough. Not God might help me if I'm worthy. But God is the presence right now, as this moment unfolds. This transforms your entire relationship with time, with events, with circumstances. You stop living in the future, anxiously trying to control outcomes. You stop dwelling in the past, rehashing mistakes. You become present, which is the only place the divine ever expresses. And please hear this, because it's crucial. This isn't about spiritual perfection. You're not trying to maintain some flawless state of awareness 24 hours a day. That's impossible and unnecessary. The spiritual life isn't a performance or a test you can fail. It's a path of awakening. And awakening happens through countless moments of forgetting and remembering. Each time you forget and then remember, you're not failing. You're practicing. You're strengthening the muscle of awareness. You're gradually shifting your default setting from separation to oneness. Behind the scenes of what looks like ordinary life, a profound transformation is taking place. Your consciousness is being rewired. Your perception is being clarified. Your identity is being revealed. Not created, not earned, but revealed. Because what you're awakening to has always been true. The kingdom of God has always been within you. The presence of God has always been the life you are. You have always been one with the infinite. This isn't a spiritual technique you're learning, or a belief system you're adopting. This is the living truth of your being, waiting patiently beneath all your seeking, all your striving, all your confusion. The invitation isn't to become something new. It's to recognize what's always been here. And this recognition doesn't require perfect conditions or ideal circumstances. It's available to you right now, exactly as you are, exactly where you are. If you're committed to this practice of returning to recognition, type in the comments, I keep coming back to this truth. If you've made it this far with me, I want you to know that's not an accident. Something in you recognized the truth in these words, and that recognition itself is a sign of your awakening. This journey we've been on together through this video is just the beginning of a much deeper conversation I want to continue having with you. If you found value in what we explored today, if something shifted in your awareness, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel. Because what we do here isn't just about consuming spiritual content. It's about walking this path together, returning to these truths again and again until they become the lens through which you see everything. Every video I create is designed to support your awakening, to remind you of what you already know deep down but sometimes forget in the noise of daily life. And I'd love to hear from you. If this message landed for you, if you feel like it was meant to find you today, drop a comment below and simply write, "This message was meant for me." I read every comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your recognition publicly. It solidifies the shift that's happening within you. If you feel moved to do so, leave a like on this video, not as a formality, but as a way of acknowledging the connection we've created here, the truth we've touched together. Your engagement helps this message reach others who are ready to hear it, who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. And here's the thing, we're not done. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how to live this truth in ways that might surprise you. Click on it and continue with me over there. Let's keep walking this path together. Keep thinning that veil. Keep remembering what we've always been. I'll see you in the next one.